Today's interview is a critical conversation around a very sensitive and hard topic with Robert P. Graves, the author of Rob Grave, a memoir that I frequently reviewed some times ago. For viewers who would be interested in getting a copy of Rob Grave, I left a link below in the description part of this interview. If you'd like to get a copy of Rob Grave directly from Amazon, I'm also going to leave a link to any other purchase platform where you can get a copy of the book. Welcome on the show, Robert.
Peter, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. Robert, you've written Rob Grave, and I know that this is a memoir detailing your experience growing up as a gay man and your struggle with childhood trauma and bipolar disorder. I want to ask you, why did you write this book?
Well, I felt that we needed to tell the story because there's so much shame and so much stigma around mental health. There's so much shame still to this day about coming out as a gay man. Even in 2022, there's still shame associated with that. And I really wanted to write a memoir that shows that if one person can overcome trauma, if one person can overcome shame, that anyone can do it.
And again, you wrote about your mental health issue that started from the age of 9 and how you told your mother of wanting to kill yourself. Then over the years,
Right.
You also suffered from chronic depression and bipolar disorder. Could you tell us a bit about your mental health journey?
Well, like you said, it started at the age of 9, and where that came from, I don't know. The only thing I can say is that my brain wasn't firing on all cylinders, even at the young age of 9. And I suffered with thoughts of suicide, thoughts of death, all through growing up. They diagnosed me at the age of 18 with chronic clinical depression. And I wasn't really being honest with my therapist, which is the key to why my bipolar disorder wasn't diagnosed until I was 44. Because, Peter, I wasn't being truthful with my therapist about everything in my life that was going on, because I was ashamed to tell my caregiver. I was ashamed to tell my therapist of what I was doing. So my bipolar disorder got missed until I was 44, when I really came to terms and wanted to get healthy.
Wow. I like the sound of that. That sounds very, hard and critical. Now, Robert, I am sorry to say this, but while I read through your memoir, Rob Grave, I discovered that you lived carelessly with sexual addiction, even in the outbreak of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Now, how do you feel to have scot-free from HIV/AIDS despite your susceptible activities to it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. And thank you for asking it, because it has stayed with me. The guilt for being HIV negative has stayed with me for years. And it wasn't until I actually wrote the book, in the process of writing the book 2 years ago, did I actually come to acceptance and forgiveness of myself. But it was painful. In writing some of the shenanigans that I went through, I really came to realize that I have a team of angels watching over me. And I thank God for those angels who kept me safe for 22 years while I was risky and self-medicating my bipolar disorder.
Wow. I love the sound of that. Now, I also read in a particular page when you were coming out to your mother, and she felt quite sad and cried. And I'm curious to ask you, how do you feel about coming out?
Coming out to my mother was probably the hardest thing that I have done in my life because you take away, um, at that time, when I came out, coming out as a gay man was most certainly a death sentence because of the HIV and AIDS epidemic, which was raging at the time that I came out. There was no cure, there was no treatment. There certainly wasn't no preventative drugs out on the market. Uh, so it was very, very hard. Um, she wanted to pray, as you know, um, and she took me to church. And I agreed to that out of respect for my mother. A lot of people ask me, why did you go to that church? Why did you allow the pastor to pray over you and lay hands on you in hopes of curing your homosexuality? And I say, because my mom asked me to. And it was out of respect for my mother that I did that. Did I believe that it would help, Peter? No. I don't believe that prayer can treat homosexuality. I don't believe that uh, good thoughts and well wishes can cure you, because I don't believe homosexuality is a disease. I believe you are born gay, and I don't believe that God made a mistake in me.
Wow, that sounds a little bit quite contemplative. Okay, now let's talk about the spiritual composition of your book. Following on from your coming out experience with your mother, and I read where you wrote that she boxed into tears, getting to know about your sexuality, and then she took you to the church in an
Mhm.
attempt to be delivered by a pastor. Though here you wrote that you intentionally fell down on
I
the
did.
pastor's hand lane so that your mother would probably believe that you've been delivered. Now, ignoring your trick here, I want to ask you, what connection do you think being gay has to do with spirituality? Do you think it is demonic, or do you think it can also be altered with prayers and deliverances?
No, I don't think it's demonic at all. I think it's very natural. There's many species throughout God's green earth that show homosexuality in their species, and man is just one of those species. I don't believe it can be changed with prayer, and I certainly don't think that God, in making me, made a mistake. I believe he made me exactly the way he intended me to be, including my flaws. I believe I'm on a path now to do work that he has meant me to do, and that is be a mental health advocate, be an advocate for change, and be an advocate for those who are marginalized and demonized because they have a mental illness.
Your in-depth answers to these questions are quite introspective to me. I consider them quite introspective. Now, I am sorry to ask this question, but I want to have your opinion of it. Through the years of you living as a gay man, do you have a self-conscious feeling that tells you that what you were doing is wrong? Were you comfortable with it, or you sometimes wrestle within yourself of wanting to break free?
Early on, before I accepted myself, yeah, there was question about what I was doing. But that's the beauty of acceptance, and that's the beauty of forgiveness. Is once you have that in your life, once you accept yourself for who you are, Peter, everything else falls into place. Uh, my life has been tremendously successful since I got healthy, since I came to terms with my bipolar disorder, since I accepted early on my homosexuality and tried to live a life that was meaningful. And my bipolar disorder kind of got in the way of that. But now that I am healthy and receiving treatment for my mental health, I'm extremely happy. I have no regrets because I have accepted myself. And most importantly, I have forgiven myself for the reckless behavior that I put myself through for 22 years.
Wow. I'd also admit that your book is the first book that I've ever read under the genre of LGBTQ. And I think that is why I am a bit surprised with it, even with the fact that it's a memoir. Now, which I'm pretty sure it can be, quite daunting and difficult to write. And this want to make me to ask you my kind of next question. I want to know, do you experience any obstacles or challenges while writing this book?
Yeah, it was, I wrote it actually in Florida, which is south of where I live. And I rented a houseboat. So I lived in this houseboat for 10 weeks. And I was completely off the grid, living on generator and solar power. And I was all by myself with just me and my laptop. And it was so cathartic. It was so healing. It was actually the experience and the action of writing your memories down just was the most beautiful experience that I've had in my life, because I feel as though I was being cleansed of all of the garbage that I had gone through in my life. As I was writing the book, it was like I was transferring all of that negativity out of me and onto paper. So it was the best 10 weeks of my life.
Wow. Now, I want to have your idea about this, since you're an author of the nonfiction book, I, Rob Grave. What is the hardest thing about writing a memoir?
Well, the hardest thing for me was the 2 years prior to writing it.
Oh,
What I did is I was journaling. Um, I would have flashbacks in the middle of the night. I would wake up with a sudden memory of a traumatic incident, and I would write it down on paper. I kept a journal at my bedside, and then putting that all together in chronological order to form my outline was pretty difficult because it took so long. It took me from the time I decided to write the book to the time I actually wrote the book
yeah.
was about 2 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
It's a long time of memory regression and constantly writing down your memories, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent. So I had journal upon journal of memories, and there's a lot of stuff that didn't make the book. I, with my editor and we cut it down to what it is today.
Oh,
There was a lot of things. There was a lot of stories that were repetitive. I was out last night with friends, and he had just finished reading the book. He was like, "Well, you didn't talk about this, and you didn't talk about that." I said, "Yeah, it was all repetitive." And my editor felt that
it's
it
disgusting.
didn't need to be in there because it was just one reckless story after another.
Wow. Now, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? What are the challenges that you've encountered in terms of marketing your book? And what are the mediums you've utilized so far in promoting I, Rob Graves?
Well, meeting people all around the world has been fantastic. Peter, we connected a couple of months ago. You reviewed my book, and it was great. My Amazon rating shot up the day you launched the review. So seeing that has been fun. Seeing the impact of interviews and seeing the impact of reviews on sales has been a lot of fun. I've been on numerous radio shows and morning programs all across the country promoting the book. And it's just been a lot of fun being an advocate for people with mental health challenges, because that's really the course I want to take in my life, is to be a full-time advocate for mental health, the mental health arena.
Oh, that's great. That sounds quite fun to me. Now, is there anything that you would love to share with the viewers about your book that I haven't mentioned or couldn't, include in my interview, and you had just love the viewers to know?
Know that I wrote it because I wanted to show the gay community and the community at large. You don't have to be gay or LGBTQA to read my book or to appreciate the stories in my book. The stories of acceptance and forgiveness are universal. And once you see the example of my life, I don't preach. This isn't a 10-step program according to Rob Graves. This is Rob Graves telling the reader his personal story of how he came to accept himself and forgive himself after years of trauma. And if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Now, I want to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with publishing a book, not in your genre, or it might also be in your genre, but any of the writers who are, out there wanting to write a book? What sort of advice do you have for people like such?
Well, if you're brand new and you just have a story in your head, or I definitely recommend getting a writing coach. I hired a writing coach that I found online, and it was the best thing that I did, because what I did was I would send her early chapters and she would critique them and say, no, you're writing in the wrong sense. I was writing in the third person and I was writing in the first person, and I had to rewrite some of my early chapters so they are all in the same tense. Oh. So if you just have a story in your head, invest in a writing coach, and definitely invest in a really good editor. Yeah. Because I wrote the book. I knew every line of the book, but I needed an editor to say, okay, that needs to go. You need to write more about this. And my editor was fantastic, gentleman by the name of Donald Weiss. And I found him on readz.com, which is an author service, which I really recommend. I found a lot of my support on readz.com. And, just don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, that's great. I'm on Readz too. I do use Readz very well. Yeah. One of their reviewers and all of that there. So thank you so much, Mr. Gray, for accepting the invitation to be featured on English Literature and to talk about your book, I Rob Grave. For people who will be interested in getting a copy of this book, I left a link in the description part of this interview for you to get a copy directly on Amazon. Thank you so much again, Mr. Rob. It's a pleasure having you here.
It's been my pleasure, Peter.